Good afternoon, everyone. Hi, my name is Alan Jarvie from Atkins, also a Spaces committee member, and absolutely delighted to be kicking off our Study Day 2023 webinars. And the first one we have today is Social Value, Technology and Good Practice. So we're joined by Dan Heffernan from F&G, who's Strategic Social Value Lead, and Sarah Taylor from Chapter 1, who will go into a little bit of detail and run through today's webinar. Please use the chat box you'll see in the right hand side, ask questions as we go through the webinar, and then towards the end of the webinar, then as it's finished, we'll pick up the questions and run through it then. So over to you, Dan and Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, and good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. I'm just going to share my screen. Brilliant. Okay, so as Alan mentioned, my name is Dan Heffernan, Strategic Social Value Lead at Faithful and Gould. Last today to give a presentation around social value, how we're embedding social value across our public sector contracts, and how we're using innovative technology with a view to sharing best practice. As I always say, social value is a movement and not a service line. So the more that we can talk about this work and encourage others to follow suit and also to learn from others, then the better. Just going to move to the next slide. Okay, so the agenda for today, I'll very briefly introduce Faithful and Gould as an organisation. I'll give a very high-level recap of social value legislation, bring you in on our four-stage process with a view, hopefully, of encouraging either your suppliers, if you're a public sector body, or your own organisations to consider similar processes. Then looking at how we're leveraging social value in our public sector contracts, embracing digital technologies, and then looking at how we're working collaboratively with partners, where I'll bring in my fantastic colleague Sarah from Chapter 1. There'll be plenty of opportunity at the end for questions, and God willing, I'll be able to provide some answers as well. So, about Faithful and Gould, we're a world-leading integrated project and programme management consultancy, part of the S&C Lavalin Group. Our aim is to protect and maximise our clients' interests throughout the planning and delivery of our projects. We've got over 2,400 passionate and experienced professionals, turning over in excess of £280 million, and an international network of offices worldwide. This enables our teams to share knowledge and experiences to serve our clients, and we've been a member of the S&C Lavalin Group since 2017, with a combined total turnover of 1.9 billion and 50,000 employees around the world. And I always say, without wanting to sound like a character out of Spider-Man, with great power comes great responsibility, and that's no different with us. We've got a huge opportunity due to the size of the organisation and our influence to embed meaningful change across our communities and help to level the playing field. It's also true that a sea change is happening in the world today, transforming what the purpose of doing business is. So together with our clients and our partners, we show leadership on social value by embedding it into our overall business strategy and the ways in which we spend and partner with external organisations. Our approach views social value as a strategic tool for creating additional social, economic and environmental impact. And at Faithful and Gould, through our own commitments and activities on our projects, we support our communities, invest in our people and protect the environments where we live and work. That being said, with the introduction of UK legislation, our clients are also looking for support in understanding how to build their own business strategies around social value and how they can best leverage impactful outcomes from their procurement activities in the social value space. It brings me nicely onto the UK legislation slide. I'm sure most of you on the call, if not all of you on the call, will be familiar with the Public Services Social Value Act of 2012 and the Procurement Reform Act of 2014. So I'll just provide a really high-level overview of that piece of legislation. Ultimately provides an obligation on public sector bodies and lays the foundations for the systematic delivery and reporting of social value. Under this legislation, public authorities and their suppliers are required to consider how their spending could also generate wider benefits to the community in terms of that economic, social and environmental piece, collectively known as social value. That means contracting authorities both have to consider what might improve the economic and social and environmental well-being of an area, and also how are they going to actually deliver against those elements. A minimum of 10% weighting to be included in public sector contracts. That being said, we're seeing an ever-increasing weight being added to contracts. I think I was working on one a couple of weeks ago, it was about 30%. So public sector bodies really starting to leverage social value and realizing its benefit and how they can start to mobilize their suppliers to benefit their wider strategic objectives. And contracting authorities ultimately to ensure that they have the right organizational resources, policies and processes in place, and that they have the capability and the capacity to deliver. So why is social value important to our public sector clients? In some cases, as I've mentioned, it's a legal requirement. It also increases the motivation and job satisfaction of staff. There's a huge amount of resources available around research that looks at the job retention and job attraction of employees, looking at how employees value a business that is both ethical and progressive, and looking at new ways of doing things. Also, it provides a transferable skill base for employees. Also leads to internal innovation, including questioning the best use of taxpayers' money and changing the mindset of service delivery, leading to a more innovative responses, not based solely on price, but looking at that qualitative element and better understanding of local priorities. So the benefits of social value, it's quite a long list, so I might not read all of them out, but they are tenfold. It can add real value to procurement, supports strategic priorities, it keeps spend in the local economy, it ensures local jobs for local people, creates a skilled and strong labour market, it strengthens the sustainability of our neighbourhoods by encouraging growth, improves the image of an organisation, improves community relations, which is really important, and I'll touch on the community element in a second. And it also builds on that capacity for local teams, improves service delivery, increases the well-being and quality of life, and ultimately increases community confidence and resident involvement. I said I wasn't going to read out the whole list, and I did that, so apologies. So when we're looking at our journey to net zero, it's really worth acknowledging that today's workforce isn't going to be the same one that sees net zero through to its conclusion. We appreciate that there's 400,000 new recruits required into the UK industry by 2050, and 1 in 5 jobs in the UK, which is approximately 6.3 million workers, will require skills which may demand either growth, so approximately 10% growth, or a reduction, again 10%, as a result of the transition to net zero. So the former, looking at how we're inspiring, motivating, and encouraging young people, particularly, to consider roles within the green space, and the latter will likely require reskilling, upskilling, and to use their current skills differently. Industry, the education sector, and government have been. It's been suggested that they should work together to ensure green careers advice and pathways are a continuous offer for all. And I guess the purposes of today in regards to the net zero space is how can you, as a public sector organisation or as a private sector organisation working with the public sector, use social value requirements within your procurement processes to focus on green skills, focusing on upskilling, on career inspiration, and looking at how that can be an innovative mechanism to ensuring we have the supply to meet this future demand. So whilst the presentation will be focused on the environment and net zero, I'll also be interweaving skills and employability because they really do go hand in hand. I won't read out the quote there, but it's from the CEO of the National Grid, which again stresses the importance of getting this right and ensuring that we have a steady pipeline of talent coming through. So I'm going to share with you our 4-stage process to embedding social value. Ultimately, we want to deliver an effective social value program. We need to plan, execute, and deliver social value that it identifies, responds to, and meets the specific needs of our different communities, recognizing that no 2 communities are the same and they all have different needs and requirements. It's really important that we put the community at the heart of any sort of decision making. We assess each community and design an engagement plan that is fit for purpose and delivers a tangible benefit. We've created a circular model that's forever evolving and revolving, should I say. And I'll just talk you through some of the key elements of that model now and how we've looked to embed that within some of our projects. So stage 1, particularly when looking at skills requirements and any sort of socio-economic or environmental requirements, we look at local statistical data from the ONS, working with local enterprise partnerships or combined authorities, pulling out their local skills reports and understanding what are the challenges that exist within a given community. We review our clients' existing social value aspirations, objectives, and wider strategic priorities, initiatives, processes, and systems. And at that point, we bring together representatives from the community. So if we're focusing on net zero and skills, we bring together head teachers, college lecturers, university professionals. We also bring representatives from local authorities, such as yourselves, partner businesses and our supply chain, to understand what is it that we can do to deliver meaningful change across our community. And I'll touch on some key examples of how we've done that in a second. This will enable us to create a tailored social value delivery plan that address pressing local issues. These are designed to add support to current local programs and integrate social value initiatives into our project delivery. So gone are the days where we used to just put down ad hoc responses, or someone in an ivory tower somewhere used to dictate what social value or corporate social responsibility used to be delivered into a community, which they knew nothing about. Now we're placing the community and the customer at the heart of any sort of decisions, and every response should be different and in response to those challenges. Move around to stage 2, and that's how do we maximize the social value that's delivered within each of the contracts. So again, bringing in wider partners, that could be from the voluntary, community or social enterprise sectors, government agencies such as the Department of Work and Pensions, but also other local authority departments. Particularly within my role, I spend a lot of time with economic development teams and place teams in local authorities, but actually engaging the education services teams, individuals working with special educational needs, etc., or care leavers can be incredibly powerful in bringing them to the table as well to look at what can be achieved. We'll engage our supply chain, which is incredibly powerful, supporting local growth, local employment opportunities, but also it's an additional resource that we can engage and then deliver significant impact through the onboarding of our suppliers. Then and only then we'll then create a social value execution plan, which will include establishing KPIs and measurement metrics, assigning priorities against each KPI, and agree a timeline of activities to be delivered against them. We'll then collectively agree how social value activities will be executed, monitored, measured, and reported on. After that point, we'll have a continual evaluation period. We don't wait till the end of any sort of project. We want to ensure that the impact that we said we were delivering is happening, and if it's not, then we'll amend as necessary. And ultimately identifying social value successes so that we can share this with the wider wider network and with the community, with a view to bringing other people on board as well. We'll then reflect on the overall impact and outcomes, and as I mentioned, review and amend as necessary before we start again into the explore phase and start to move through an additional program or into a different project. I mentioned KPIs and measurement metrics. I assume the majority of you are familiar with the TOMS framework, but if not, the National TOMS framework was launched in 2017, supported by the National Social Value Task Force and Local Government Association. It provides a minimum reporting standard for measuring social and environmental value and ensures organisations can procure, measure, manage and maximise it easily. So the suggestion, if you're not using this metric, then potentially consider to do so, because by using this established TOMS framework, which consists of over 300 measures within your procurement processes, you'll be able to insist your suppliers implement and then measure environmental, social and economic activities in support of your net zero aspirations. So just using your supply chain a little smarter, looking at how they can support you in achieving some of your strategic objectives, and then using the TOMS framework to track that impact and then report that back to various stakeholders. So as I mentioned, there's over 300 measures. I've copied in 3 of them, but there obviously are a significant amount more. So that could be providing expert business advice to for the voluntary service sector, social enterprises, or it could be supporting micro or SME businesses to achieve net zero. It could be looking at how through your contracts and your procurement processes, you're insisting that CO2 emissions are saved. It could be reducing food waste to landfill, or it could be volunteering time for environmental or conservation causes and looking at that sustainable ecosystem management. So you can implement those metrics through kind of your procurement, and your suppliers will then have to articulate how are they going to support those themes, what they're going to do to achieve them. The top image there I copied out from one of our clients in the NHS from their social value strategy, and they recognise that more than 60% of NHS carbon emissions occur in the supply chain. So really starting to leverage social value within their procurement will help them to reduce that down help reduce health inequalities, drive better environmental performance, and deliver more value from procured products and services. In addition to that, I imagine some of you on the call are already doing this, but looking at how you can embrace digital technologies in a new way. If you're not using dedicated social value systems, then just consider how, as a contracting authority, you're going to track and monitor commitments. If you're a business, then how are your partners going to track and monitor your commitments? How are your suppliers going to evidence the impacts that they're having? And how can you routinely review progress? And how can you also engage other internal departments and service areas into this work? As I mentioned at the start, this really is cross-cutting across a number of departments, ranging from economic development to place to education. Actually having a dedicated system where everyone can feed into this to kind of work towards a common goal can be really, really powerful. What we're also seeing is our clients are starting to stipulate the use of social value tools in contracts. So looking at, okay, if you're going to work with us, we need you to be working on this particular contract, so on this particular platform, so we can track the impact and we can review it as necessary. So as an example, 2 platforms that I've referenced, so Loop and the Social Value Portal. Just a disclaimer, there are others, and we're not aligned to any particular one, but they're two of the most popular. We've got access to over 6,000 outcomes and will provide the social return of investment and the gross value added on any built environment project. And these tools have the capability to forecast the return on social value for a period of 25 years. And these calculations can be used for a variety of reasons, for business cases, reporting back to members of the public, levelling up funding and planning submissions, and ultimately evidencing how you're making the public pound go further by making it a dual benefit. So the top screen grab is from one of our own dashboards over a set period, with a social return of investment figure on the left, what the environmental impact has been, the economic impact, and the operational value. And then the bottom image I've taken from one of the projects that I've worked on in Southampton, where the project value was of 40 million. And using the TOMS metrics and through these social value tools, we were able to calculate the social value impact of 74.9 million that went back into the communities, which meant for every pound that the client spent with us, £1.88 went back into the community. So it can be incredibly powerful, and it is measured and in line with a set framework. So just a bit of a case study around a couple of our clients and how we've brought this to life. So if I mentioned Derby City Council, wider strategic priority for the client was a strategic focus on green skills and employability, specifically within the education setting. They had lower than average skill levels in their young people, and there was a real concern around young people with special educational needs and or disabilities transitioning into the workplace. So together, through those community roundtables and through that local needs analysis, it was clear that a bottom-up approach lacked sustainable impact. So those careers fairs, those ad hoc sessions, whilst they hold some value, actually they lacked depth. So we wanted to do something above and beyond that would last the life cycle of the project and beyond. It was also recognised that we would be unable to support the skills demands required by net zero by doing what we've always done. So we needed to change either the process or the delivery. And there was a real opportunity here to strategically influence the education system as well. So together with Atkins, our parent organisation, we've helped to create a new programme of activity looking at placing our colleagues as strategic STEM governors in underrepresented schools. Initially looking at 44 STEM governors in 44 underrepresented schools by this summer, impacting a minimum of 18,000 young people, with a key focus on primary schools, recognising that the younger you start with this work, the more likely we are of invoking meaningful change. Schools in high areas of deprivation, looking at levelling the playing field and breaking down that disadvantage gap. SEND was a huge priority for the client, so ensuring that we were supporting and addressing that. And then looking at girls' schools, ensuring that we're promoting opportunities for females to enter into engineering. So our 6-part plan was to place STEM career governors into schools and then plug in a 4-year programme of classroom enrichment with a core focus on green skills. looking to the future. What are the skills requirements? What are the jobs that are on offer, and how do our young people get there? We interconnected campaigns from across all of our divisions, and some of those I'll mention in a second. And then it's not about F&G and Atkins, but ultimately, if we start to do this work, we'll become a household name with students, teachers, parents, and the local communities. We'll also be able to plug in our work experience opportunities and encourage our clients, our competitors, other organisations to promote their work experience opportunities through our 4-year programme of enrichment, with a longer term aim of creating a sustainable talent pipeline for the future in support of our net zero aspirations. Another example is Hammersmith and Fulham. We provided core professional services across the local authority, across multiple projects. And during those local needs assessments and roundtables, Hammersmith and Fulham said we've got strategic priorities around high levels of youth unemployment. Skill levels are below the national average. They've got responsibility as a corporate parent and concerns around transitions and how their care leavers are going to transition into employment. And there's also high levels of refugees settling in the borough. So from a net zero perspective, we created a partnership arrangement with the Department of Work and Pensions and engaged our colleagues in their mentoring circle programme. And we delivered green skill workshops and structured sessions at our offices. And that was particularly powerful. I remember one young gentleman saying to me he never thought that he'd be able to step foot in a building like ours, never mind learn about some of the projects, and certainly not being able to secure employment. So really powerful that we just changed the process of those sessions ever so slightly by holding them at our offices, and it had a real benefit. As a result, 13 local residents were employed full-time on a permanent basis through that contract. We've also engaged the council's housing team to provide work insight sessions and environmental support to Afghanistani refugees. And those sessions included how to use smart meter technology, looking at how they can recycle. There's a real cultural difference there. So actually we expect them to know how to recycle and to use this technology, but they've never used it before. So that was really eye-opening. And as well as looking at how they can travel more sustainably and promoting green travel options. We supported 67 refugees with 62% enrolled on progressive support programs. I won't mention the third one in detail. That talks around our care leavers and how we work together with our supply chain to create a dedicated mechanism to support care leavers to enter into further and then higher education, and also interweaving green skills throughout that process as well. And then more broadly than that, looking at the whole net zero approach, looking at what the skill system is doing and ensuring that we are directly feeding into that. A lot of head teachers during these roundtables said to us, actually, a lot of our teaching staff go from school into university and back to school again, and they've not had that industry experience. So and because the pace that we're moving at, they can't be expected to keep up, which is a fair point. So actually, we became strategic cornerstone partners of the Careers and Enterprise Company, together with Hammersmith and Fulham Council, and now we're supporting all the state schools in the borough with progressive careers education, which quite excitingly includes curriculum mapping, looking at what the teachers taught to to teach in the classroom and how that aligns to green jobs in the future, both raising awareness of net zero and green skills, but also raising their aspirations and improving attainment and behaviour at the same time. I won't go into this details, but I can send this out for reference. But this was a full service offer to the BD Group, who are wholly owned by the London Borough of Barking and Dagenham. And they wanted us to kind of create a social value framework around sustainability and their environmental impact that they could have as an organisation. So we recruited social value ambassadors from across the organisation. They worked with us to create a programme of activity, both upskilling and volunteering initiatives, as well as engaging their supply chain and looking at how their supply chain could use the TOMS metrics, as I mentioned in the previous slides, and their suppliers are now obligated to consider environmental TOMS when they're bidding for the future work. But technology can also be used to engage community organisations. Our voluntary community have a huge amount of experience in this space, and leveraging their support has been really, really powerful. So we've now got a presence on a Neighbourly platform, which is a good cause platform where local good causes can place their volunteering opportunities, or they can place a call for support on there. And then organisations, both public and private, can say, actually, we can support with that. and our teams can go in and volunteer for those good causes. Similarly, we can engage with those good causes if we want them to deliver workshops or help us to engage communities in a different way. And two of the organisations that we've worked with historically through the platform around net zero and the green agenda are on your screen. And we also utilise the power of virtual reality. Our supply chain fed back to us a couple of months ago, probably longer, a year or so ago, saying that they had real difficulties in releasing colleagues to support social value outreach initiatives, particularly micro businesses, stating if they take one person out of their operation to deliver this activity, in some cases they've only got 4 or 5 people, so that really slows down their operation. But the public sector client that we were working with insisted that they do have to support, which we completely get that as well. So we worked through those community roundtables, through that local needs assessment piece, and we created a partnership arrangement with an organisation called Launch Your Career. They spent 1 day of filming at supply chain's offices and out on site, and this now has enabled participants to engage with our supply chain with a 360-degree virtual reality experience. It also enables us to break down geographical restrictions. Personally, I'm based in Nottinghamshire and on the border of Derbyshire, and some of the communities in the north of Derbyshire and Nottinghamshire are particularly rural. So actually sending our teams up to Derbyshire wouldn't be practical on a day-by-day basis. So ordinarily would mean that those students miss out on these opportunities. But using the technology, we're able to communicate with those schools and they're able to access them. So we're also able to target the hardest to reach talent, both raising awareness of green jobs and that supply that's needed, whilst also offering employability support and guidance more broadly. We're also looking at rolling this out to the Department of Work and Pensions, tapping into that resource, and in conversations with the Ministry of Justice to look at how we can engage the prison estate as well. The final case study that I'll just discuss before I hand over to Sarah is the fantastic work that we're doing with Bradford Metropolitan District Council. So if anyone's on the call from Bradford, then huge kudos to you because they've been brilliant to work with. But they've got significant issues in Bradford, and through our local needs assessment, it was quite clear that skills was a real restricting factor in establishing growth in Bradford. So following pre-engagement meetings with local community, which included parents, community organisations and education and skills team at West Yorkshire Combined Authority, it became apparent that the root causes behind poor academic attainment and lower than average skills levels in the most deprived wards in Bradford were historically due to poor literacy levels in young people when they're of primary school age, which consequently means they fall further behind when transitioning into secondary education. And as the quote from the head of skills and employment at West Yorkshire Combined Authority states, large numbers of people lack basic literacy and numeracy skills that provides a basis for further learning and progression. English language proficiency is also an issue in parts of the city. This needs to improve if we're going to successfully meet our net zero targets around skills. That was also combined with the challenges that we faced, that our project teams that were working on some of the projects in Bradford were based remotely, or that they were unable to support specific social value delivery. So an in-person support wasn't feasible or practical, but we were really keen that we did something. So we reached out to our fantastic partners at Chapter 1, who provided an innovative response. And I'll just stop sharing my screen and hand over to Sarah to talk to you more about what they're doing and how we're doing it.
Thanks, Dan, and good afternoon, everybody. I will just share my slides, hopefully. Can you see that, Dan?
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Great. Okay. So, I'm Sarah Taylor. I work for the charity Chapter 1, and I'm going to tell you a bit about the charity and the programme and how we worked with, how we are working with Faithful and Gould this year. Chapter 1 is an online reading programme, and we focus on regions of deprivation across the UK, so social mobility cold spots. And we support 5 to 7-year-olds, so children in primary year 1 and 2. And the reason we focus on such young children is we can make a bigger difference to their lives and their life chances by intervening at a very early stage in their education. We are a registered charity. And there's lots of great reading schemes out there. Many of them are face-to-face. We are completely online and always have been, even before COVID. And this way we can connect more volunteers with more children, and we can scale up our programme as we have been doing since 2018. It's extremely convenient for the volunteers. So we have people at all levels within organisations doing this once a week for 30 minutes. And because it's online and remote, there are no issues around being close to a school or having to travel to a school. You can be anywhere in the UK reading with a child in one of our schools. The teachers love it because they can carry on teaching the rest of the class while each child has their individual one-to-one lesson sitting at the back of the classroom using the laptop and headset that we provide. And most importantly, it is proven to have a really positive impact on these children in terms of their confidence, their reading ability, and their communication skills. So this is a profile of a typical child who would benefit from our programme. And we are currently supporting just over 2,000 children across the UK, but we know that many, many more need this programme. So these are children who, if they didn't have this support, would get to the end of primary school without the basic skills, reading skills that they need for their secondary education. And the latest figures from 2022 are 38% of children from disadvantaged backgrounds are in this situation, very sadly. So these are the children who don't have books at home and their parents don't read with them. Many of the parents have their own challenges with literacy, and over 7 million adults in this country have literacy challenges. And the teacher doesn't have time to sit and read with these children. Every child needs that one-to-one reading at this stage in their education, and these children are not getting that at home, and the teacher can't provide it in the classroom. So how does Chapter 1 work? We match each corporate volunteer with one child, the same child, for a whole school year, and that's really important. It seems like quite a big commitment, but it is only 30 minutes a week. And once people start this and get into the routine of doing it every week, they find that it just becomes part of their normal weekly routine, and they don't want to miss a session. They don't want to let the child down. We have to do an enhanced DBS check on every volunteer because they are reading with young children, even though it is remote and the child is in the classroom. You choose a slot that works for you as a volunteer, and you can change that slot really easily by logging on to the platform and selecting a time in the class timetable. You don't need any software. It's all on the platform. You just log on. You're given a number to dial into the classroom. One of the children picks up and you start your lesson. It's that simple. We work in teams of 10. So our corporate partners support one or more teams of 10 employee volunteers, and they will normally read with 10 children in the same class. So the volunteers can be anywhere in the UK and can be in different locations, but they will normally read with 10 children in the same class in the same school. So we support the volunteers throughout the year. They have to attend 2 training sessions before they start, just 30 minutes each. And then we run other additional training sessions, and there are lots of materials on the website, and we have drop-in sessions during the year as well. So we don't just leave the volunteers to it, we make sure they are supported throughout the year. And our partnership with Faithful and Gould is a great example of social value in action in a specific location. As Dan mentioned, Bradford has particular challenges, and in that region, 39.8% of children are living in poverty. We focus on schools that have more children on free school meals than the national average, which is currently 23%. The Faithful and Gould team of volunteers are reading with children at 3 schools in Bradford, La Page, Fernville and Byron primary schools. And you can see the free school meals numbers for those 3 schools. So since November, when the Faithful and Gould team started reading, They've done a total of 150 sessions, 157 sessions between them, and nearly 60 hours of volunteering. This is recorded on our platform in real time. So Dan is able to access a dashboard where he can see exactly who's done their sessions and their hours at any point during the year. And this is part of the strategy to support literacy in Bradford, which is a particular challenge, and we're addressing it at a very early stage and helping those children on the platform, on the programme. It's part of Faithful and Gould's educational outreach strategy. And it's not just the children who benefit from this. The volunteers, we get fantastic feedback from our volunteers throughout the year, many of them posting on LinkedIn and other platforms about their experience. And this is a nice quote from Neil, the director at Faithful and Gould, about the benefits to the volunteers in terms of their own skills and confidence and well-being. It feels good to help a child with their reading during the year and to see them improving. And we can also measure the impact on the children. So at the end of the year, we get the teacher to confirm the progress that each child has made through the levels. There are 9 levels on the platform. And we get the teacher to confirm the progress that the children have made that each team has been reading with. So you've got some great social value metrics in terms of the number of hours that the volunteers have provided and the progress that the children have made during the year as well. And I speak to we have over 100 corporate partners. So I'm speaking to companies all the time about how we can support their social value key performance indicators, their CSR objectives. And these are probably the most common ones that come up. We are very focused on specific regions within the UK, and I'll talk about that a bit more in a minute. So we can focus our support on these schools where there are high proportions of children on free school meals and where there's a real need for what we're doing. But we can also connect corporates in other regions and parts of the UK with the children in those schools. It's all about improving educational outcomes. And there are specific TOMs in the TOMs framework around educational outcomes. We can quantify that in terms of the number of children that are reached in a typical year, and also in terms of the number of volunteering hours that each team and company provides. It's about developing the future workforce, which Dan has talked about this afternoon. It's about underpinning STEM. I know a lot of your companies are very focused on STEM and getting people into your sector, the future talent development. And without literacy, none of that is going to be possible. It's also about motivating your own employees and attracting employees as well. So there's a big recruitment and retention case with volunteering, because lots of young people want their employers to be able to offer volunteering in local communities. And because we're focusing on regions of deprivation and then schools with more children on free school meals, we are very focused around helping those most in need. And at the final stage, the teacher will choose 10 children in the class who will benefit the most from the programme. So it's very, very focused. And this is where we are at the moment in the UK. So this is where the schools are that we're supporting. Our corporate partners are right across the UK, and we have volunteers in London reading with children, in Glasgow, or indeed in Bradford. So geography is not limiting, but we are focused on helping children in these regions and in these schools. We're also adding Manchester from September. So we're already approaching schools in Manchester for the new school year. And we are able to help over 2,000 children at the moment, largely due to the support that we get from our corporate partners. And they provide not just the volunteers, but also most of the funding for the charity and the programme in the UK. And we've also launched this year in 3 new regions, so Glasgow and Edinburgh, and then in February we launched in West Cumbria, which is quite an interesting case in itself. We were approached by Sellafield and Jacobs, who are the programme and project partners in West Cumbria. They wanted to launch into the region. We weren't in the region at the time, but with their help, they have managed to enlist the support of their various partners and suppliers working with them in that region. So we now have 110 volunteers from 10 different companies supporting us in West Cumbria. And we're expanding. We're hoping to double that from September. And that's because Sellafield and the programme and project partners encouraged their suppliers and partners and made them, suggested that they focus on the certain KPIs that we are able to support through our programme. So it's been a great partnership in Cumbria. East Sussex is another good example. We were actually approached by East Sussex County Council 2 years ago to launch the programme in East Sussex. They helped us with a bit of funding, and we also got companies like Waits Group and Jacobs, who had projects in the region, to come on board and support us with both volunteers and funding. So we do collaborate a great deal with different consortia across the country and also with the local councils. And we worked very closely with the Bradford Council when we first launched in the region. And these are just some of the companies we're working with. So you'll recognise a lot of those names. We're pretty much across all the sectors, but we have seen a lot of growth in your sector in the last 12 months. And this is largely driven by social value and the indicators and objectives that are now being included in contracts and bids and tenders. So I'm having to learn a lot about social value myself, but it's a great driver for getting companies involved in our programme, and I'm happy to speak to anybody who wants to know more about how this works. And the impact of the programme is measured, as I said previously, in terms of the number of hours each volunteer and each team provides during the year and the progress that the children make. And we do record that. We provide reports back to each partner at the end of the year, so they've got that data. We do a broader evaluation right across the programme, and we can also share that with our partners. But the feedback we get from the teachers and the volunteers is overwhelmingly positive. We just go on each year trying to include more and more children and improve the programme as we go along. And just to finish, a nice bit of feedback from one of our teachers in Bradford, David Taylor, about the impact of the programme on the children. We hear this quite a lot from teachers. It's not just about teaching a child to read. It's about giving these children confidence and also inspiring them to think about their futures and the types of jobs they might want to do, the qualifications they might want to strive for. But it is transformational with a lot of these children who start school with very little reading, very low confidence and self-esteem, and very little aspiration. So it's about much more than helping a child to read. And I will stop sharing at that point. We have a great little video which we can send the link to you.
Great stuff. Thank you. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Sarah, from Chapter 1, and setting out the sort of the great work that you're doing and making a real difference. And if I could just remind anyone on the call, if you want to ask a question, please put it in the chat box. Social values. I mean, it's really interesting because I'm a firm believer that if done properly and targeted properly, can make a real difference. But it needs targeted in the right way. You know, as an example, I was with the Mayor of Bristol yesterday, and there's some frightening stats in some of our cities really around inequality. You know, what 1 in 4 children still live in poverty in Bristol. They've recently started up something called Bristol Works that actually they found that 56% of Bristol children didn't have access to work experience, which is scary stats. And I think actually by having a proper targeted social value plan, you can make a real difference and impact to children's lives. And that's just one part of some of the social value element that you can make a difference to. So no, thanks for sharing some of the stuff, and it's pretty wide, but I'm personally, from my side, that it's really targeted, and that we can become a little complacent. It becomes almost a little bit like greenwashing as social value becomes like that, and it needs to really be targeted in my view. I think I'll get off my soapbox in a minute. That's my personal view about these sort of things. So in the absence of any questions really, and there's a few things from me really, and it's around meaningful measurement of progress and the impact, and you've touched on a couple of ways of doing that. Is there any other examples of how we might measure some of that progress, and maybe even pivot if we don't feel it's having the right impact?
Yeah, and from our perspective, it's important that we don't overclaim. I think you hit the nail on the head there, Alan, around greenwashing. We don't want to social value wash either. So ensuring that it's in line with what a project's scale, duration, ensuring that the measures are put forward at the earliest possible opportunity, and then regularly reviewed at various touch points. And whilst we can use the themes, outcomes and measures framework and use the social value tools that we've got, is very much about just reviewing that progress with the beneficiaries, with whoever we're engaging with, and actually talking to them around, is this delivery or this initiative, is it useful? What are you getting out of this? And what is the long-term outcomes that we're trying to achieve? So if we're delivering workshops in schools, then okay, that's great, but how does that feed into a wider piece of work? And the move away from just doing ad hoc sessions, or I routinely say tick boxes, which we've probably all been guilty of in some way, shape or form, but actually looking at that whole approach, that kind of programmed approach to delivery, to ensure that if we are offering our teams time, which is a valuable resource, that it is going to be useful and it's feeding into a much wider program, and then just having that regular review process with the client and taking into account all of the metrics.
Yeah, okay. Thanks very much, Dan. We've had a question from Holly Sutherland. Thanks, Holly. A question for Dan. So you're on the hotspot again, Dan. Did they face any challenges with internal buy-in when developing a social value model, and how do they overcome them? And Holly works for an SME, and resourcing is often the issue when raised when discussing commitments.
Yeah, it's a great question, and yes is the answer. There is difficulties. While social value has been around since 2012, it's really only taken off in the last couple of years, both due to the legislation, but also seeing people starting and organisations starting to see the value. I think if social value is treated as a bolt-on initiative, or the old corporate social responsibility, and I sometimes call it the pink and fluffy stuff, then there's going to be a difficulty in engaging teams and ensuring that organisations see the value of it. But if you can articulate the benefits around that skills piece, future labour support, winning work, how we're supporting other strategic priorities, whether that's for the client, such as net zero, or whether it's internal, that's how we start to see that conversation move along. And it's also a part of just dipping the toe in the water as well. It's not about, with our supply chain, when we're working with them, we're not expecting the whole program of activity to be delivered overnight. It's working with them to, what can they do? How are they able to implement this? Can they get involved in the virtual reality, or can they put forward some resources that our teams can then go out and support? So it's starting small and then growing it, and then just continually evidencing the impact that has. And I think it's even more important that we have that whole approach that I mentioned to Alan a second ago, because people want to know that actually if their time is going to be given, or the resources is going to be put forward, that it benefits the majority. So it's really starting to work. And ultimately, public sector, rightly so, as they're becoming more kind of financially reliant on themselves independently, they're looking at how they can leverage and how they can use their supply chain to support their priorities. And there's no sign of that going anywhere. So it's just bringing people on that journey for this as well.
Great stuff. Thank you. And an interesting question from Anthony Slack. Social value is clearly very important. However, we noticed through recent single stage tenders that price is 70% and quality 30%. This indicates the social value aspects are secondary to price. How do you advise your clients relative to tenders, relative to social value? And it's an interesting one, isn't it? And at times our industry is a bit broken, and when you see stuff like that, you know, it's the sort of thing as consultants we're continually kicking back because it's just not the right weighting, and quite often we would choose not to play with those sort of weightings ourselves. But Dan, do you want to pick up?
Yeah, I think I share that frustration. It certainly was the case, and we see that quite often. I think more and more frequently we're starting to speak to clients, and that quality development is coming through over and above price. We've certainly been awarded contracts through our responses around what we're doing to address social value and wider community benefits. And Derby City Council won't mind me mentioning them. If anyone's on the call from Derby, then please interject. But they have a strategic focus around care leavers, the significant amount of funding that has been allocated to care leavers at the moment. So they're stipulating in their contracts that any of their suppliers moving forward need to have a strategic plan in place to how they're going to support care leavers and how they're going to support them transitioning into employment. And that is that historically they were very much price driven, but actually if you take into account the amount of money that we're spending on supporting those care leavers, just changing that slightly to leverage the support of their suppliers has already been incredibly impactful and has saved them money in the longer term. So I'm not saying that that's the case for everyone, and we are obviously it is varied, but all of the noise that's coming through and the conversations that we're having both with central government and our local authority partners across the country are people are starting to wake up to look at how they can start to implement social value across their contracts as well.
Yeah, great stuff. Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I think we'll probably leave it at that. If there's no other questions, Amanda Laycock, thank you very much for your comment on the chat. It's much appreciated. And just like to say thank you to Dan from Faithful and Gould, and also Sarah from Chapter 1 for your inputs today. And really, it's a nice way to kick off this program around, to say, social value technology, and there's some really good practice there as well, and some lessons learned. A couple of asks, I suppose, from me really is that there will be a survey popping up shortly in the chat. If you can have a little look at that, and whilst we don't want to score Dan and Sarah, it's really nice to get your feedback and how we might shape some of these webinars going forward. But there is also, for those that are regulars with Spaces, there is a study day that actually is held annually. And I would say it's very good because I do go, and it is very good content with great speakers. And it's in Reading this year on the 26th of June. Please look out for that. It's open now if you wish to join us and register.
Sorry, Alan, it's the 22nd of June.
Oh, 22nd. Do you know what? I've written down the 22nd and I've said the 26th.
Yeah.
I almost realised when I said it, so apologies. It's the 22nd of June. It is in Reading, though. I got that bit right. So it is in Reading. But have a little look out on the social media posts. Have a look on the website, and it's available if you wish to come along. It'd be great to see you. But lastly, just thank you all for joining us today. And we hope to see you at one of the next webinars in the near future.
Thank you, everybody. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.